Good morning, fellow humans. And again, that's HUEMONTS, colorful nuts. Today is Saturday, August 16th, 2024. It's about 6 o'clock in the morning. Here we are in wonderful southwestern Nevada, Pahrump or Pahrumpertucky, you choose. My name is Edward Bevilacqua, and this is G.School. Right you are. Hello. And hanging on by our fingertips. What's new? Whatabevy, what's happening with your Jacksonville employment, etc. Atticus von Atticus, how is you? And unfortunately, wasn't able to respond to you last night, Matt, because someone tried to return to Star. Mama D. So she tried to crash the party. I've reached out to my job to see why I'm not being scheduled yet. Yes, good. OMG. So, we shall see. They're once again playing games. Once again. Okay, but here we are at G.School. G.School is what we do on weekends, Monday through, our purpose for being here is to help our students and interested people in their journey through this life. On belief that there's something that comes next. And, everybody's got to believe something. You either believe we have a transcendent soul and something happens, or you believe we are just atoms in the void, that this is all there is. We're born, stuff happens, we suffer, and then we die. Got to believe one of the two. Got to choose. Doesn't help you to say, I don't know, I don't care. Because if you say we're just atoms in the void, you can say, I might as well make the most out of it. I go through this thing one time, and I want to leave my mark. As the Romans would say, you either make history or you get lost in history. It's be like Abraham Lincoln. I am not going to be insignificant. This is the one shot. You can be like the Romans. Believe in God's, but we want to have a statue because we don't want to be forgotten. Or you can say, no, this is the journey. There is a destination. This is not the destination. This is not the whole thing. And you can further have a belief that the journey is a function of the destination, or the destination is a function of the journey. How you do on the journey has an impact on what happens next. So it's just like you plan a road trip and the car breaks down, maybe the destination changes. Maybe you have to use your resources to get the car fixed. So by the time you get there, oh no, not good. So we proceed on the basis that this life is just the journey to the destination. And we want to best prepare ourselves for the destination, not just the journey. Okay, so today's theme is men's breakfast. So I will be leaving at about 7:30, which means I have a short Peloton day, a short day. Saturdays is usually kind of leisurely. I get to take a ride through somewhere. Last Saturday, it was Tuscany, I think. And my book came in. Rag and the Bone Shop of the Heart, a poetry anthology. Big book, really good book. Well, it's a good book for the price. And I also got the other book. Okay, it's in my briefcase. One of my textbooks for school. All right, so men's breakfast. The question to these pastors is, number one, was Jesus the Creator incarnate? And that's kind of a reference to John 1:1, right? In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was God. So is Jesus the Creator incarnate? Is he part of the triune God? If he is, then he's the Creator incarnate versus the Creator or God the Father who is not incarnate, who is spirit. So the Creator incarnate is Jesus. Okay, so if Jesus, Creator incarnate, says, here's my commandments to you, do we really need to go beyond that? Question mark. Monk. And I would argue no. So putting on my Christology hat, bonk, bonk, you ask the question, why do we have to study the Old Testament, especially in light of the fact that the Jews, the Pharisees and Sadducees, they're the ones who had Jesus killed because of blasphemy? And he kept going around saying, no, the laws were not made for man. Man was not made for the laws, etc., etc. You have been told this, but here is what I tell you. Here's what I say. So a lot of that caused problems. They wanted him dead, and they got it, but he came back. So why do we care about the Old Testament? Well, initially, the Old Testament was for the purpose of pulling in the Jews. Jesus was a Jew. The question was, was he the Messiah? Well, if you don't have the Old Testament, asking the question whether he was the Messiah has no meaning. So in order to bring in the Jews, you had to bring in the Old Testament. You had to transition from here's the law, here's the Old Testament, Jesus is the Messiah. Let's move forward. However, for the Gentiles, stage 2, to get the Gentiles in, we needed to do something else. We needed to be able to harmonize with Greek philosophy, which is far different from Mosaic law. For example, for Greeks, people had a dual essence. You had a spirit and a body. You had a mind, you had a soul, and you had a body. Well, the Jews did not believe that. For the Jews, it was only the body. It's resurrection of the body. And that's still the case today. So, the New Testament, the purpose of Paul in the New Testament was twofold. Bring in the Gentiles, get them to understand what this is, number one. And number two, how do we create an institution? How do we go from Jesus ministering to the people, sending the disciples out, sending the apostles out to make disciples of the whole world? How do you go from that to setting up churches? Because Jesus wasn't about setting up churches. He was about spreading the news, about apostleship. Go out, Spread the word. Make disciples of all nations. Well, was that possible? Okay, well, I will have to talk to Atticus von Atticus later. I will call you about 7:30 when I'm heading to the breakfast. So, we need to pull in the Gentiles. We need to create an institution. We need to have permanent churches of the people versus wandering, versus ministers going, apostles going from town to town. We need to set up a structure. Why didn't Jesus do that, man? He's the creator incarnate. He could have thought about that. Well, for Jesus, it was pretty simple, right? You have the Beatitudes, but you have, here's the two things. Love God with all your heart, mind, and soul. No, if you want to be one with the Father and I, love God with your heart, mind, and soul. One. And number two, love one another as I have loved you. Number three, make disciples of all nations. Okay, cool. How do we do number two? How do we love one another as I have loved you? Simple. You give them food, you give them drink, you give them clothes, you give them shelter. If they're sick, you heal them, you visit them in prison, and you bury the dead. That's how you help them. You take care of the orphans and widows, the people less fortunate. How do we create disciples of the whole world? You go out, you preach the good news. If they don't want to listen, you just keep going. Dust off your sandals, keep moving forward. Now, is that easy enough for people who can't read, for the common man to be able to understand? Love one another. Love God, love one another. How do we love one another, man? Well, if people are hungry, you give them food. If they're thirsty, you give them something to drink. If they don't have clothes, you give them clothes. If they don't have a place to stay, you give them shelter. If they're sick, you help them get well. If they're in prison, you go visit them. If they're dead, you bury them. Pretty straightforward. Okay, so given that was it. Now, unfortunately, breakfast is going to be a complex, convoluted thing that leads to the point we have to have a shepherd. We have to have somebody guiding us, leading us, telling us stuff that's different than what Jesus said. And that seems to be the common theme no matter where I go. No matter what church I go to, that seems to be the common theme. Now, Catholic Mass is different. It's more sacramental. It's more sacred. And have a teaching from the gospel. You have an Old Testament, a New Testament, and a gospel. The sermon is mostly about the gospel. What does it mean for us today? Versus some churches, they just go through the Bible chapter by chapter, verse by verse, line by line. Ugh. What's the point? Especially now with YouTube and other apps, you can do Bible in a day, Bible in a year. Let's see. Okay. Field Marshal. Okay, sit right. All right. Now, what a bevy. Anything happening? Looks good. What looks good? Des Moines 2032. Okay, so we're just about at it, but I think for our people today, we should get down and people watching now and in the future, ask the question, what do I believe? Do I fundamentally believe that this is all there is? Or do I believe this is not all there is? That there's something else. There's something else after this. This is not the destination. This is the journey. And you got to choose. Don't put it off. Okay, I will give you a call when I get off the phone. When I get on the peloton, when I get off the chat. What a baby. Okay, so let us see. Anything else we need to talk about? Seth Godin, in defense of the hard parts. Yesterday's post was a little glib, without a doubt. We add more value when we focus on the emotional labor of important work, leaving others the chance to create commodities. But the repetitive, difficult nature of leaning into commodity production can give us insight, humility, and skill. It helps us understand just how hard the hard parts are and creates an opportunity to bring innovation to the work to be done. Learning the skill and caring enough to show up to implement it again and again can give us the foundation to see what others might miss. Right, learning the skill and caring enough to show up to implement it again and again. Repetition, repetition, repetition. In defense of the hard parts. One of the hard parts is showing up, doing it over and over and over again. So let us endeavor to do that. Embrace the suck. Get comfortable being uncomfortable. And with that, I'm going to say Auf Wiedersehen, and that's it. I will call you in the next 10 minutes. What a baby. Alrighty then.